Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
Hello, everybody. This week's podcast is so fun. It's inspired by a huge crash in our pantry. I was sitting at the counter on Friday. I was actually working on a different podcast and I heard this huge crash, and we had a shelf fell, and it fell on top of another shelf, and that shelf happened to contain all of our alcohol. And my husband loves to make craft cocktails. So we actually had a fair amount of alcohol in our house. And so when I opened up the pantry door, there was like an inch of liquid and broken glass everywhere, mixed in with like cookie cutters. It was chaos. And cleaning up that mess got me to thinking about the difference between thinking problems and doing problems. And so that's the topic of this week's episode, is understanding what's a thinking problem and what's a doing problem so that you can attack any problem that you have more effectively and with less stress. So to do that, we're going to start by talking about, this is pretty obvious, but thinking problems are problems that you have to solve with your thinking. Okay, that's all the planning and analyzing that you do before you tackle a problem. And that thinking and planning and analyzing, that is how you're solving the problem. So with the pantry cleanup, that was immediately my first thoughts were get rags, get gloves, put music on, which is interesting. Because I knew it was going to take a while and I wanted to have a good time while I was doing it. I didn't want to be irritated the whole time. But all of that, strategizing and analyzing, thinking what I would need to clean up this mess, that's the thinking part of the problem. And then the other half is the doing. It's just literally picking up all the shards of broken glass and, getting rags and paper towels and sponges and all that to soak up all the mess. That's the doing of the problem. And most problems have both of those components. They have both a thinking component and a doing component. And where most of our modern stress comes from is when we use our thinking component in ways that don't help us. So if while I was cleaning up all of that broken glass, I was beating myself up for overloading the shelf, which is not what happened, but I could have thought that, then the whole time I was picking up the glass, I would have been also beating myself up. Okay, the stress that I would have been feeling while I was cleaning up that mess was caused by my thinking thoughts, like you shouldn't have overloaded the shelf, or you shouldn't have so much alcohol in your house in the first place, or why did that shelf fall? The builder didn't do a good job putting the shelves in the first place. All of those thoughts, those are the thoughts that would have been creating the stress. Okay, the thoughts that were helping me solve the problem were thoughts like get rags, get sponge, put on music. Okay, those planning and analyzing thoughts helped me, but thinking my home was built by a shoddy builder, that thought doesn't actually help me solve the problem of cleaning up this giant mess. Okay, so we're going to talk in this episode. I have dozens of examples about how we need to retrain our brain to be thinking in ways that help us solve problems. And the first step of that is noticing the difference between thinking problems and doing problems. And the reason that we have so much trouble with this is because from an evolutionary standpoint, our biology is primarily set up to solve doing problems. If you think about our emergency response system, like our own internal, what gets turned on when we see a problem, that's fight, flight, or freeze, right? That system was designed, that fight or flight response was designed because we used to have primarily physical doing problems, right? Like run from bears, which is a terrible idea. You shouldn't run from bears. You should stand still. We saw a bear this year when we were hiking in Washington. You should definitely stand still. But the urge that I had, like the strong urge when I realized that I was pretty close to a bear, was to run. Okay, that urge, that's my evolutionary biology response, like in motion, trying to protect me and keep me alive. Okay, and those are the kinds of problems that we used to have, like protect our food pile and run from bears and, fight or flight type problems. But those aren't the kind of problems that we have now. Our problems now are more like what to make for dinner and who's changing the toilet paper roll and what did my boss mean in that last email and why aren't my kids more respectful? Okay, those problems we have to first solve with our thinking and then solve with our doing. Those aren't problems that are fighting for our survival. And what we have to understand is that our system, our emergency response system, our personal 911 still perceives every problem as a problem that we have to do something to fix. So let's go back to that changing the toilet paper roll. I was buying toilet paper yesterday and I have to laugh because now we've gone from double rolls to mega rolls, like that don't even really fit on toilet paper holders because people have complained so much about changing the toilet paper roll that toilet paper manufacturers have decided to make bigger rolls so we have to change them less frequently. Okay, that's a doing solution. They think they can sell more toilet paper by solving our problem that, people complain about who's changing the roll. But changing the toilet paper roll is primarily a thinking problem. Or thinking that who changes the roll is a problem is a thinking problem. Okay? Because it's not actually a physical problem who changes the roll, right? Like, time it next time you have to do it. Like, does it take 10 seconds? Probably not. It's like such a tiny thing, but it becomes a problem because of the way people think about it, because of what they make it mean that they're always the one to change the roll. Like, if you add up over a month, how many seconds that is, for sure you're spending more time being irritated by it than it would take to just do it or not do it. Set the roll on top of the little holder thing and just decide not to worry about it. But people turn it into a whole thing, and then they turn into a whole thing like, which direction do you roll over? Do you roll under? And like, if that's fun for you, absolutely keep doing it. I have a preference. And when I see it on the way that I don't like, I just flip it because nobody else in my house cares. But if it bothers you, either do it or decide to not let it bother you. Okay, the fact that it irritates you, that's a thinking problem. That's a problem that you can only solve by better thinking. And I can see where this might be a little confusing because I do have to physically do something. Like if I want the toilet paper to go the other way, I have to flip it. But what I'm saying is the actual flipping of it is not a problem for me. That takes like 2 seconds. I definitely waste more time on Facebook than I do on flipping toilet paper rolls. So the problem is the irritation that some people feel about this. That's the actual problem that you want to solve. And you solve that with better thinking. Okay, another example that I hear a lot from clients. I'm laughing because this is such a common problem, and we had it too, is kids and chores. is asking kids to unload the dishwasher. And then there's sighs and drama and complaints. And so many parents just choose to do the chores themselves rather than put up with all of the drama about asking them to do something. Okay. And then it turns into a fight. And then parents make it mean that they're not raising responsible kids. And it turns into a whole thing. So it's a great example. So unloading the dishwasher has both a doing component and a thinking component. Okay, you have the thought, that's the planning and analyzing, like it's my kid's job to unload the dishwasher. And maybe you even have to remind them. Okay, that's where the thinking transitions into the doing. Your doing responsibility might be to remind them. Okay, then they have whatever reaction they have to unloading the dishwasher about how it's not fair and it's child labor and whatever it is that they say. Your responsibility with the problem is done because you've done your doing part by asking them to do it. And maybe you also have the doing part of holding them responsible for the chores that you've assigned them. But their reaction to you asking them to do those chores, that is not a problem that you need to solve at all. Okay, you've done your thinking part, you've done your doing part, and their reaction to it is not your responsibility. They don't have to love. Like, I don't know anyone that loves unloading the dishwasher. It just needs to get done. So their reaction to you asking them is not a problem. It's not a problem that you need to solve with words, with thoughts, or with actions. Like, it's literally not a problem. Now, again, like I said, holding them responsible for unloading the dishwasher. And if there's a consequence, if they don't do it, they can't go out or they can't do whatever. Like, holding that consequence is part of your doing. But managing their reaction to you asking them, that is not a problem for you to solve at all. Okay, really, I don't need to do anything about their complaints other than to train my brain, to train my thinking to not react to them. Okay, and whatever that looks like for me, training my brain is my responsibility. Managing their reaction is not. And this is such a great example because so many of our efforts to try to control people are because we've mixed up what's our responsibility and what's their responsibility. So they have a reaction and we think their reaction is a problem for us. Their reaction triggers our emergency response system. We go into fight or flight, and none of those reactions are useful, right? That's how you end up in a fight over the dishwasher, because their reaction has triggered your emergency response system, which is from the old caveman days. And it tells you your only choices are to fight, flight, or freeze. And when we understand that that's not a physical problem that should be solved by our physical response system, when we understand it's a thinking problem, then we train our brains not to react. It's so much better. And the less we react, the less they complain because it doesn't get a response. And so over time, we train their brains to respond differently. So let me give you another example. So you make dinner, and when you put it on the table, someone says, "Ugh, what is this?" So healthy eating is a priority for me. And so when I think about the problem of what to make for dinner, my thinking, the thinking portion of that problem and the analyzing and the planning all goes into making healthy choices available to my family at dinner time and for snacks and all of that. But we're talking about what to make for dinner. Now, my son preferred eating pizza every night for dinner, which it's not an unhealthy choice, but it's not the healthy variety that I wanted to provide. my portion of like the what to make for dinner problem was analyzing and thinking like who's going to be home and how much time do I have to cook and what do we have in the pantry, and then I would make dinner. And his reaction to what I made for dinner was not my responsibility. And however your family rules are about eating what's on the table, or if they can make their own choices, whatever that is for you, depends on how you want to think about the problem. Now, what's fun about this example is, so my son would ask every night for pizza for dinner because that's what he wanted to eat for dinner. But I said no. So he solved his problem of wanting to eat pizza much more frequently than I was willing to buy it by getting a job at a pizza parlor. And it's kind of funny because through his high school years, he actually worked at 3 different pizza parlors, which I think is pretty amazing. Like, he even got picky about where he worked based on how good their pizza was. Because he wanted to eat pizza frequently and he got a free pizza every shift, he worked like more than 4 hours or something like that. He worked a lot in high school so that he could eat pizza as often as he wanted to, which is really genius. He thought about his problem, how to eat pizza frequently, and then took actions based on his thinking that he could eat pizza as often as he could buy it for himself or get it for free, when he was working a shift. And that kind of problem-solving thinking is that's a characteristic that came because I didn't make his desire to eat pizza my problem. Okay, that was his problem. And so he solved it, both with his thinking about how to get what he wanted, and then with his actions of getting a job at a pizza place. Actually, at increasingly better pizza places. By the time he graduated from high school, he was almost assistant managing several shifts at this very good pizza place in our area. And then I fell totally in love with this amazing salad they made and was kind of bummed when he stopped working there. So, in that way, the way that I thought about solving the what's for dinner problem helped him. It role modeled for him how to think about his what to eat for dinner problem and solve, his problem for himself, which of course, like I said, that's a characteristic that we want to develop in our kids, the ability to constructively solve their problems. It's kind of funny how many opportunities we get to practice this concept because my neighbor has been mowing his lawn on and off all morning. I don't know what is happening over there, but this is the 3rd time he started and stopped. Well, he's still mowing right now, but it's the 3rd time he started mowing his lawn today. And my thinking right now is that I'm super irritated. Initially, didn't have a thinking problem about this. He started mowing the lawn and I just paused recording the podcast until he finished. And even the second time, I didn't have a thinking problem. I just had a doing problem. I just stopped recording the podcast. But now that he's doing it a 3rd time, I'm having a thinking problem about it. And I can laugh now because I've recognized that it's not a doing problem, it's a thinking problem. And we get so many opportunities to practice this that it's fantastic because the more you practice it, the better you get at catching yourself earlier and earlier and the less stress and frustration you feel. And with the holidays coming up, I really encourage you to start practicing this now because most of the holiday stress is a thinking problem. The better you get at noticing when you're having a thinking problem versus a doing problem, the more likely you are to have the perfect Christmases, the amazing family memories that you're trying to create. When you're doing it the other way and creating all that stress, you'll actually be more likely to have amazing family memories if you start to see the difference between thinking problems and doing problems. And as someone whose kids are grown and flown now, you really, really want to take advantage of the years that you have with everyone under the same roof. And you want them to remember their Christmases as time of love and laughter and family gatherings and not fighting and bickering and mom being pissed off that you didn't help make the cookies. Okay. So if you need help with this, like I could give examples all afternoon long, but I want you to start thinking about your own examples. And if you need help with this, if you're feeling stress and you're worried about something or overwhelmed, what I want you to do is start to see if you can separate out what's a thinking problem and what's a doing problem. And if you need help, I want you to email me, okay? parentingsuccessfulteens@gmail.com. and tell me what's going on. And I will help you start to parse those two things out. Or you can direct message me on Facebook, or you can find me on Instagram. I'm everywhere. So just let me know if you need help and let me know how applying this goes. I want to hear from you. If you know someone that would benefit from this information, please, please, please share this podcast with them. I want to help as many people as possible because the more we reduce stress, the better off we all are. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for listening to Parenting Successful Teens. If you enjoyed today's show, then I've got a treat for you. I have a free guide that teaches you how to get your teenagers to tell you about their day. No more one-word answers. And grabbing this guide is super easy. Just text the phrase, "Get Teens Talking," as all one word, no spaces, to the number 44222. So that's the phrase, "Get Teens Talking," without any spaces, to the number 44222. And then you'll be prompted to give the email address that you want the guide sent to, and then it shows up in your email box just like magic. You know what else is magic? Having teenagers that talk to you. Now, I can't promise that you're going to like everything they have to say, but I can promise better conversations. Grab the guide, and I'll talk to you next week.